the writers of Avengers Endgame.
Thank you for coming to a movie you could rent for $6.99.
Obviously, the screenwriters of this, you wrote Avengers Infinity War, all of the Captain America movies, Thor the Dark World, which also plays into this movie in important ways.
You had to bring it back.
You had to bring it back. I feel like the writing of this story begins early on when you're writing these other movies. You're creating long-term plans for where you're going to take these characters. When would you say you first began to ruminate on what this story would be? Which film was it in the series where you began mapping out the end point?
Well, I think a lot of the time you start dropping seeds where a humble person, which we are, says, we'll never get there, but it would be great if.
Or someone else may get there, but
Yes.
we won't get there.
So like when, at the very end of First Avenger, when Steve misses the dance with Peggy, you start going, I wonder if there's ever going to be a way to get those two together again after 70 years has passed.
But it's we have not been writing the movie for 10 years.
No,
we only wrote it for 4 years.
Yeah, we did not start formulating Endgame until we got the job, because otherwise we'd be insane.
No, the Guild won't let you write for free.
But it was it on, I think I interviewed you when Civil War was coming out, and at that point you were beginning the planning stage for the final two.
So when Civil War came out, we had already finished the first draft of both Infinity War and Endgame. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, we got the job as we were prepping Civil War. So that meant that Kevin Feige, the head of Marvel, had hired me, Chris, Joe, and Anthony Russo simply based on Winter Soldier to do both.
And the
Avengers
months of sitting in a room planning
Civil War, but it's
proving we hadn't had a nervous breakdown.
But I bring it up because it's such a leap of faith, right? We'd only
Yeah.
had one movie as a foursome under our belt.
Wow.
Yeah, and so that meant we got the job in April 15. Thought about it all throughout shooting of Civil War, and then the last 4 months of 2015, we cracked both those movies. So like Tony's death and Cap's dance were 3x5 cards in September of 2015.
I think in a certain way, and credit to Kevin as a visionary, but he saw that the team worked. Not just us, not just the Russos, but down the line, Dan DeLue, Jeff Ford, and that if he was going to tell this story in the amount of time that could be told, you couldn't build a new team every time. You had to take the team that really worked well and keep putting it through its paces, movie per movie per movie. And in a way, tell one big story so that it's even more cohesive because he just kept rolling it.
Do you think that the reason something like this is unprecedented is that it's very hard to take those leaps of faith? That when you have to be able to say, we've made one movie and we're prepping another, let's sign up for these other gargantuan projects, that's something that's sort of a barrier to movie making on this scale.
Oh, I hope when the coffee table book comes out about the Marvel Universe years from now, that we all appreciate, whether you like all the 22 movies or not, the capital that Marvel built up allowed them to do things like make a movie starring a raccoon and a tree, right? Because they knew that even if it didn't do that well, it probably was gonna make enough money back that it wouldn't be a total disaster. Or to kill main characters. What other studio you would have already had Iron Man 4 if it was any other studio, right? But they decided, no, we're just going to take chances on all these other things, and to sort of put a flag in the ground and say we're going to end something, and take characters off the table, is, I think, kind of daring, but selfishly it was really great for us because it meant we could tell certain types of stories.
Yeah.
Sequels for Marvel aren't like they were in the 80s, you know, where if you had a sequel, it was just going to be 10% different than the previous one. I mean, they can be radically different.
Why do you think it's important that the story ends? Why is it important that Tony Stark dies? Why is it important that Cap gets to go back and have that dance and live a different life?
Because it legitimizes the whole thing. If you just keep going until it peters out or you lose interest, it kind of decays backwards and make you think less of everything that came before it, because you're like, no, it didn't add up to anything. To have the opportunity to very deliberately tie all those threads together and have it add up to something and have it end is, I mean, that's what stories are about. That's, it's how we judge whether something was great or not. If at the end of Great Gatsby they got into a car and drove off and, who was it, Tom? Or no, it's I can't remember his name. Anyway, if Gatsby lived and ran off with Daisy and Nick inherited the house and then they wondered what was going to happen next, like, we wouldn't remember that book. It's because the ending is great.
So the Greater Gatsby, the Greatest Gatsby.
That's right. More Great Gatsby. Yeah. Not so great Gatsby.
Too great, too Gatsby. Wait, let's keep going.
That's good. The man is dead. Let him rest. But yeah, no, I mean, it needs an end or it loses meaning. The end is what cements the thing. And to be given that opportunity to actually sew it together and bring it to a crescendo and, take people off the board, finish their arcs. And it's also, things had built both consciously and unconsciously to really nice endings that if you denied them, if Tony made it out the other side and Iron Man 4 was waiting there and he had to fight a car that turns into a rocket, you'd be like, they went one too many. But like the arc's built right to those points. And you need to, take that seriously.
But why does he have to die in order for that to happen?
Because look at the man is very determined. He would keep going.
I mean, the answer that sort of we've come to is we realized over the course of the movies that Cap and Tony were on sort of crossing arcs, and so that Cap, who had started as completely selfless and jumping on grenades willy-nilly, was becoming more self-interested. Not to say selfish, but if you watch Civil War particularly, he's making decisions based on what he wants, and even if it breaks up the Avengers, it's to save Bucky. And Tony is started as the brash billionaire playboy, and the stakes are growing for him, the responsibility is growing for him. And we realized at one point late in 2015 that for Steve to be his best self, he was going to have to get a life, and for Tony to be his best self, he might have to lose his life. And we went, oh, that's pretty good.
He had to have that moment which I think is a beautiful moment in the first Captain America film, when he's still the scrawny little guy and throws himself on the grenade. And sometimes the grenade goes off, right? Sometimes the grenade goes off.
And that's why he can't die in this movie, because he was willing to die in the first movie. That's not a journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if we could talk about, you mentioned the point where you began breaking the story. Do you do that together? Are you doing that in a room with Kevin? Are you doing that with the Russos? Is there a larger Marvel brain trust that just begins to talk about the story and then you write it? How is the story broken? What's it like in those earliest stages?
But a conference room is reserved, and that is the first day is the best it will ever smell. That's true. And basically, we're there every day, banging away at this thing, often with whichever assigned producer from Marvel is on that project. This one started with Jeremy Lancham, switched over to Trin Trin. And then people come in as they're available. You know, Joe and Anthony were in post on Civil War for a lot of the initial plotting, so they would come in and go, "That's insane, we have to go." And Kevin is a very busy man, so you get him when you get him. But we're in there every day, Steve with his stack of 3x5 cards, and just sort of plotting out, in this case, 2 movies, but multiple versions of 2 movies, and taking them down the road and going, you know, this movie we're plotting out does not work. Let's take those cards down. And it takes months, if you're lucky.
I mean, this is a room full of writers, so it's not as impressive to them, but it's you know, one wall is movie 1 and one wall is movie 2, and the only extra part is that the third wall is baseball cards of all the Marvel characters, and we could sort of move them around.
Are they actual like collectible cards, or are you?
They're in my dresser, and I think I'll hold on to them for a while.
Really? Are they specially made, or are they just
Marvel makes them, yeah.
Like
Some intern in-house makes them, yeah.
But they're paid for you guys. They're not like tops.
No, yeah. They're. I think Nick made them, and they have a magnet on the back. And in the early versions, because there were a few, because they get dog-eared and bent and stuff. It says, "Do we have them or not for this movie?" And there was a little rating. We didn't know how much each actor made, but it had either a little $1 sign or $5 sign.
That's how much they cost to be in the movie.
It was sort of just a guideline,
You know, and they would allow us to do anything, and anybody's contract would get renegotiated as needed. But it was a fascinating glimpse into the other side of the
Were
machine.
they ever like, there's too many dollar signs?
No, I mean,
If
it
there's
never
dollar
was
signs,
that.
you better damn well have a good story for us.
Yeah. Try not to leave $5 signs on those sidelines.
Wow. So, like some sort of magnet board then? You said they
Yeah,
have
it's a whiteboard that's also a magnet board if we're going to get technical.
My God, the technology.
So you're popping those on there and literally like just drawing a timeline for
Oh
the story?
yeah.
Or how's it
So at the
go?
beginning stages, it's wouldn't it be interesting if Groot and Rocket and Thor went on a journey together? What kind of chemistry could you get from that? But also, it's, you know, think of we took this job because it scared the hell out of us, because it was. I'm kind of talking about the both movies. That first movie has 23 characters in it.
First movie
is
meaning
Infinity War. So if you know that movie, you can, and you know how we ended it. It was in large part just so that the second movie would have fewer characters and we could work with them. But when you have the whiteboard there, you realize, and we started with 65 characters. I mean, it's just, you know, everyone who was vaguely alive. And when we narrowed it down, you know, you don't want 23 people in a scene, kind of ever. So that's what the cards were for, was to sort of
Visualize it.
Well, pick dodgeball teams, right? And sort of go, all right, that's going to be a team, and they're going to have, you know, and tell 4 small stories. Infinity War is very simple. It kind of feels complicated simply because things are being woven, but the stories themselves are really easy. But you know, there's 23 people.
I don't think standing in the middle of a star,
Holding
it open,
It's
to
easy.
allow the energy to pass through you, to melt steel, to create a magic axe. I don't think there's anything easy about that.
Easier said than done. Now, so you begin. It's interesting. You said like you're building a movie, and then people like Kevin are coming in, weighing in. The Russos are weighing in. Are they pointing out things to you that you are like, oh yeah, you're right, that doesn't work, or is it confirming things that you're sensing?
It's all of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it's, you just want to, if you can get a boyish smile out of Kevin, you know you hit the, you hit the inner Kevin who went to see Back to the Future when he was a kid, and you go like, okay, all right, this is working. And because, you know, we in our enclosed vacuum can become convinced something is good, and it might be good on a mechanical level, you know, but it's not hitting the emotions, and people come in fresh and go, yeah,
I don't care.
yeah.
It's a weird thing to ask you, but like, what was something that didn't work? Like, where was
easy
something?
example. Our first draft, so many examples. Like, if you have all night, I can tell you all the things that didn't
Something you wanted to work.
Here's how terrible we are. So our first instinct wasn't to necessarily go back to all the scenes you'd seen before in Marvel movies. It felt a little indulgent, and so we went sort of just left of center of those scenes. And in fact, we didn't go back to the Avengers at all. We went back to Thor: The Dark World, and had a whole different story for Tony and all this. And Joe Russo went, why the hell aren't we going back to one of the best movies we have, and all the possible things that we could do there? And it was in doing that, we went, okay, you're probably right. But more importantly, those stone missions in the second act, and by the way, you can tell why it's 3 hours, is because you can't cut any of the missions in the second act. You got to own them all. They were opportunities for emotional repair, and we really got more serious about that as the drafts went on. So it's not just a shopping trip. It was a chance.
And it's not just a clip show.
Yeah, it's not a clip show.
In order to bring these people to the end, they have issues they need to resolve. They have people they need to talk to one last time, whom ordinarily they wouldn't be able to talk to, dead people. But it just so happened they were on a time travel mission to get magic stones, which is the plot. But the emotional content we were able to get through that was invaluable.
Well, you talked about Steve Rogers having to get over his selflessness. He literally beats himself up in this.
Yeah.
Is that some sort of a metaphor?
Oh, listen, we've taken...
He compliments his own ass.
Sometimes we just took opportunities. What else were you going to get those opportunities?
Shows the formation of his ego.
Oh, no, I do find that a nice moment where he's got to say his catchphrase, for the third time, right? I can do this all day. And old wizened Steve sort of goes, yeah, I kind of know this. And because he sees that younger Steve hasn't figured it out yet, right? Doesn't have the perspective that he does. And he's taking the piss out of him. He doesn't, dislike him, but he's like, wow, that me is tiring.
So the ending where Cap ends up going back and having this dance in the living room, did you ever consider having him actually show up a week later, as he promises at the end of Captain America: The First Avenger, at the Stork Club?
Well, I have to believe that she didn't actually go to the Stork Club after he crashed into the ice. He'd be sitting there going, "Man, she really did put me off.
Not that smart a lady."
Yeah.
I guess that would have been too much, too much.
Oh, that's an example. There's a few of them that were the first draft was stayed all the way. It was exactly a shot.
Also, in a I suppose a selfish way, we wanted to maintain the integrity of the Agent Carter TV show and have her be genuinely still bereft at the loss of Steve Rogers for at least 2 seasons.
That's what I wondered.
We sort of figured that's 1948, and she's now on the East Coast for some reason.
There were so many questions about the timeline and whether he lives with her, whether that's an alternate timeline, whether he's in our timeline. Is it good that people are still asking that, or do you feel like just make a choice, audience?
Oh,
It's great.
yeah, it's fine.
Wondering about that?
To have given people enough material to wonder about and to, those aren't unsatisfied questions. Those are, intrigued questions.
Right.
I'm delighted if people are still chewing over this thing.
I wondered if it was.
If I get it and it's stupid and I don't like it and I'm talking about it because it was dumb, that's one thing. But if it's, I honestly don't know, and it's kind of cool to think about, that's great.
And it's also Marvel's prerogative to tell those stories if they want to, and they can do it however they like.
Yeah. How much were you given tips on other projects they had further down the line? Loki vanishing with the Tesseract. did you know there was going to be a Loki series? And they've
No, I think they saw that and went, "Hey, Loki series."
really
Kind of more that.
more that.
I mean, I think they certainly, Hiddleston is a great actor, and he's iconic in that part. And we murdered him in Infinity War, so there were a few opportunities, and this seemed like an opportunity. Yeah, the Disney streaming service is not a real. It's it's a big risk. You're doing a lot of interesting work, long form work with characters that have not been long form. So I'm fascinated to see what all these things are. We're like Wanda and Vision are going to have 6 hours.
Yeah.
They haven't had 45 minutes. So that's good. What stories will they tell?
But I think the Loki question is sort of indicative of why Marvel works, is because it wasn't planned out. And we genuinely did kill him. And, we then moved on to the second movie. And he's still dead, by the way. It's just a pocket universe. And that sequence just came about because we were trying to figure out, well, how do these things not go right? How did this heist not just work perfectly? And we kind of came up with this slightly, slapstick version of the angry Hulk comes out the door, whacks Tony in the face, thing goes across the room, and just ends with Loki picking it up. And it was just part of a kind of synchronized gag that then has now led to another direction that Marvel can take it in. And that looseness is kind of why Marvel stays organic, and it doesn't feel like we're just marching down the road to some sort of plan. It says everything has a life of its own.
Like good improvisation too. You take
Right.
the cue and move on from there. So we talked about Cap and Iron Man, but the other big sacrifice in this movie is Black Widow. Why was it important that her story or her life come to an end? Because I know we have more stories looking back at that character or whatever the Black Widow movie will turn out to be.
I haven't seen it.
We'll have to see.
Right.
But why was her sacrifice so important as her character and also as a beat in the movie?
Right. Not without some controversy. I mean, we certainly thought long and hard about it. We knew we were killing the sort of first female hero of the Marvel universe. She had come. Her character is a former villain. She was a Russian spy and had done terrible things, and hers is a story of redemption and finding a family. You'll notice those 5 years. Even Steve Rogers is thinking of giving up. That's what the peanut butter sandwich scene is. It's like Captain America is thinking of just hanging it up, and it's Natasha who refuses to do that because of her heroism and also because of this investment that she has. This is all I have. This is the identity I have now. So that when she gets to Vormir and you have that face-off with Jeremy Renner, where both of them are trying to do the right thing and be the heroes that we know them to be, she beats him. I mean, for her it's the conclusion of her arc. We've always thought, right? Someone, because we stupidly came up with these rules in the first movie, someone's going over that cliff. So we had to decide. And by the way, you had to reasonably love the person next to you. So we couldn't send Rocket and Hulk. So
Fond of each other.
Very fond. So it's a puzzle of our own making. But it felt like it was the resolution of her arc, that if she could sacrifice herself for her new family and for half the universe, that was worth it to her. There's interesting anecdotally, like we after the first draft, we all thought about it and said, all right, is there any version where this doesn't happen, because maybe we'll get blowback. And a number of women on the crew, when we said, hey, we're thinking of maybe Hawkeye goes over, right, said, don't you do that. Don't rob her of this. And that always, it chokes me up. Because I think we would have a much different conversation, right? Think about it if Hawkeye had, pushed her aside.
He'd go on the fight.
Yeah, I think we'd have a different conversation, and I don't think it'd be a better one. It'd be, why'd you rock me with that?
Give her the chance to jump on the grenade, right?
Right.
Is that it?
That she jumps on the grenade.
Yeah, I don't mean that as a joke. But I think that's a
sure.
noble
That's
thing.
the thing. And so I'm really proud of that moment. I don't have any regrets. The only regret is that it comes at the end of Act 2. So you can't really roll around in the grief because we got another hour of movie and we haven't solved the A-plot problem. So that's the only downside, is that you take this big character off the board so early.
You mentioned versions where she lived. I mean, how many people here saw the movie for the first time tonight? Actually, wow.
Thank
quite a
you.
few. I know, we've watched it many times in our house, and I know people see the film over and over again. For those people who have watched it and dissected it and studied it and have theories about it, what can you tell us about those alternate versions? The dead ends or ideas that maybe they were cool, but they just didn't work for the story. Like, was there an alternate story for the Hulk besides him finding peace with Bruce Banner and becoming a sort of hybrid?
More often than not, the alternate versions were sort of side roads we took for character that left the plot behind. And it would be entertaining, and it would be interesting, and it would be cool to look at, but it would cause you to press pause on the quote-unquote Thanos plot. And it sucked the air out of the movie. And it became kind of... There was a fascinating sequence in the first movie where they went into a place in the Doctor Strange universe called the Mindscape, and everyone faced themselves. And it was great, but it had absolutely nothing to do with it. So it had to go much too
Banner meets the Hulk, I think, in the arena from Ragnarok. And it was
all sorts of stuff.
Only one of them was getting out of there, and then that one showed up in Wakanda. He had merged. That's actually what ended up happening. Is that merging that currently happens in a diner when he's eating, huge stack of pancakes. That initially happened at the end of Infinity War, and it threw that last 5 minutes off. It happened in Wakanda. He's fighting a big creature, and the Hulk in that movie refuses to come out, if you remember. And then they eventually sort of come to a realization or a compromise, and he busts out of the Iron Man suit and beats the heck out of this guy. That whole third act is a march toward losing, and that's a big win, right? It's a guy solving his problem and being kind of a funny character, right? Because now he's eloquent, and so we had to, at the last second, scrap all that, put Banner and all these scenes that used to have Smart Hulk, and then reshoot first act of Endgame, say going to Thanos's country lodge, right? That used to be the Smart Hulk, because we'd already shot all that, so we had to reshoot all that.
We'd made Mark Ruffalo gain over 500 pounds. He was very upset.
It actually solves a big mystery for me, because when I was on the set, it was Mark as the Hulk.
Yeah.
And I kept thinking, they must be saving this for the second one. We're going to see like a Wakanda battle. But he was the Hulk.
No,
we changed it. Yeah.
And
oh, wow.
it just we learn every time we make a movie, and we get stupid in between every movie and have to get smarter. That we wanted everybody to have this enormous journey in the 5-year jump, and to really see in sometimes shocking ways how the loss had affected them. And we hadn't given Banner one because we transformed him earlier, and he had nowhere to go. And suddenly, by needing to take it out of the first movie, it was the perfect thing. And you didn't need a scene to explain it. You just needed to live with it and enjoy it. And eating pancakes, an enormous stack of pancakes, works just as well as some scene in a lab where you're pouring things in the test tubes.
We see Thor go through a big change in those 5 years, and no pun intended. But that's part of his journey. He's going to be the first Marvel character to get a 4th solo film.
Yeah, you didn't see that coming, did
It's
you?
amazing, right? That's a crazy journey for a character and actor, right? After Thor: The Dark World, no one is saying Thor's my favorite character, or very few people are, right? But thanks to Taika Waititi, right, and Hemsworth's willingness to be a goofball, I can't think of. I mean, you know, toot his horn like that. I can't think of a better 3-movie run for an actor to steal the show. You know, from Ragnarok to Infinity War and Endgame. That scene in Infinity War where he sort of tears up talking to Rocket about all the things he's lost is hilarious and sad. And I mean, I remember on set that day watching this guy just crush this scene. I mean, I was angry. He's just so handsome, and now he can do this. You know?
Turns out he's funny. Turns out he's good actor.
He's funny.
Lovely man too. Yeah, he's great.
So, you know, we see the story essentially end for Tony, for Steve, for Natasha, even Hulk and Bruce. I feel like that's an end. We may see him again, but it's a resolution for that character.
Right.
You're gonna have to undo it or do something to bring it back.
He's got a screwed up arm now. I don't know how they.
Yeah.
What you do.
But that was the goal was to
sort of wrap the original.
to take the original OG Avengers and put them down, right? And that meant escorting them off the stage or giving them some sort of conclusion. So that's again,
Give them a bow.
sure.
You know, settle their emotional issues so that they're actually, you know, because nobody becomes a superhero because they're really well adjusted. They generally do it because they're screwed up on some level, and everybody is kind of fixed or dead.
But Clint Barton and Thor, they're continuing on.
Yes, and I would say Clint not that fixed. Like he's got a lot of that's awkward dinner
Was there much
conversations.
discussion about not putting them down, not wrapping those characters and leaving them for future things because there was
Oh
more
well, I mean,
potential
sure. You know, we could have had a bloodbath and all 6 of them, you know, gone down swinging. That seemed even more depressing than it is now. It would have been a no, it was.
But why those two? Why did you see them, or why did you and Marvel and Kevin and the team see them as having potential to keep going?
Well, I mean, I think it's not necessarily that we knew they'd get more vehicles. It's just that their characters were, you know, Thor has sacrificed and sacrificed and lost and lost. It's not a good ending to kill him, you know. To have him, you know, finally reasonably content with himself and with his current weight, by the way. Like, there were some people who were like, well, he has to magically lose weight again.
He may be something, right?
No, he doesn't. He's happy now. Let him. He looks good.
Very jolly.
Yeah. Basically, that was one of the you know, those sobering moments on set where, you know, some people are afraid he's going to put on the fat suit. And he comes out and he basically looks like everybody on the crew without their shirt. It's like, that's not a fat suit, that's a normal person's suit. But he was resolved. Like there's a joy in letting him go off aimlessly into the universe. And Clint got his family back, and there's something, you know, that's the whole reason he was doing everything.
So I want to wrap it up by just asking you your favorite line that you contributed to let's limit it to Endgame, since that's the one.
Sure.
we just
No, we should be talking about that. Again, it's not an amazing line, but I think it's sort of chock full of meaning. If you are a fan, because I love the idea of it. When Steve Rogers in an elevator leans over to a guy and says, "Hail Hydra," it's pretty fun because you are absolutely expecting a rock'em sock'em punch up because it was awesome last time, and I'm sure I'll see it again. But you know, the idea that you know what it means to all these guys, and that second to that, for more emotional reasons, is when he is on your left. I think on your left. It's just sort of, yeah, it's a great one.
I don't know why I love it so much. I love when Evans says, when they're on the ship above, I guess it's
Titan 2.
Titan 2, yes, there's a lot of planet names. And he's looking at the the compass, and Natasha says, "This is gonna work," and he says, "I know it's gonna, because I don't know what I'm gonna do if it doesn't." Like, I love the fact that you have this superhero who's at the end of his rope, and has a plan, but doesn't know. He's screwed. Like, and Evans has so much soul when he does these things. Just always makes me very glad that we got to have a little moment like that, amongst the, fighting and world destroying, that, doubt.
Oh yeah, that whole first hour is grief and mourning, and that you haven't seen in other sort of blockbuster movies. And it's a lot of broccoli before you get your candy at the end.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all this.
Thank you.
Fascinating. I've been along the line for a long time, and I still feel like, let me think about this movie. Christopher Markus and Stephen McFeely. Thank you very much for being here.